Hello, and welcome to The Charge Cycle, an electrifying new podcast on all things fleet electrification. I'm Todd Trauman, I'm the CEO of Emission Control. If you are a procurement manager, a fleet operator, or one of the millions of people tasked with a zero-emission deployment goal, this podcast is for you. We speak with industry experts, funding experts, OEMs, and many others to help you stay ahead of this enormous electrification shift underway. Hello, welcome back to The Charge Cycle, an electrifying new podcast on all things fleet electrification. I am Todd Trauman, your co-host here, along with Connor Whaley, our OEM and Strategic Partnerships Manager at EMC. Connor, how you doing?
I'm doing good. And just before we start, I just have to say, I have noticed I've worn the same shirts in a lot of these episodes. So I just want to say I do have other things in my closet. So just wanted to make that clear.
I will not rat you out for those listening if you continue to wear that red shirt, Connor.
Red shirt. I'm going to remember wear blue or black next time.
Very nice. Well, we are extremely excited to welcome Michael Dews to the show this week. He is the VP of Renewable Energy and Smart Buildings at Lattice Energy Solutions. This is a group I'm quite excited to talk about. They have a deep expertise in all things clean energy and renewable, but with, I think, a specific focus on microgrids. So today we'll be talking with Michael in detail about what those are and how they work, who they're for, and a host of other exciting details about microgrids specifically. So Michael, welcome to The Charge Cycle.
Hey, thank you both. I appreciate it. Todd, nice to get with you. And Connor's been just a great person to get to know. And we've expanded our horizons and got a lot of collaboration that we're excited about. So we're glad to be connected to you.
Totally. Well, just to get things kicked off here, Michael, definitely want to hear a lot more about Lattice, but I want to hear about you. Getting to know the professionals in this clean energy space is important, and so I'd really like to hear kind of just where you've been, where you've gone, and how you ended up here at Lattice before learning a little bit more about the company specifically.
Yeah, so I've been in the construction, commercial real estate world for a good portion of my career. My family is very steeped in shopping centers and retail development, and been involved in a lot of entertainment type of development. And so I would go, literally on vacations, and we would visit projects along the way. And, we were always complaining, we want to get to the lake, or, we're ready to go, skiing or whatever it was. And so it was a great learning experience because I was in the trenches early. And so we enjoyed that space, and so I went to the university to really study on commercial real estate and real estate in general. And so I learned a lot about land. I learned about what the value of land is and how you create a highest and best use for that land. And that now takes on new avenues as we look at energy, because it's a brand new revenue stream and a brand new area of value add that comes with real estate. To be talking about energy and that integration is so important. So that's where my background is, and from there I spent some time in the nonprofit world, traveling to several different countries, working on different projects, and that led me into back into a corporate world, and we were developing products for the agricultural industry, to help being on the front end of the organic space, and helping to promote regenerative agriculture and AI and different chemical types of products that were very innovative. And so that's what led me in the space of working in agriculture and waste to energy and some of the things that we could be doing in the field of agriculture. So we're very close to the food and agricultural space. And so when I connected up with Lattice about a year and a half ago, they have been very involved in agriculture from day one. And as a company, as a construction company, they've been very involved in agriculture and farming specifically. So it was a nice fit.
Got it. Oh, interesting. Sounds like a nice progression to the clean energy world. Ultimately, I will say I love the image of young Michael sitting in the back of the sedan, and you guys seeing a chain link fence and a dozer and hitting the brakes to see what was going on at the particular.
Exactly. Those were the days when you had those station wagons and the boys all sat in the back, and we'd throw things out the back of the window to our friends, and we got into a lot of trouble. So that was those were fun days, though.
Good. Yeah. Oh man, sitting backwards too. No less.
Exactly. Without seatbelts. Without
Yeah.
seatbelts. Remember those good days.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about Lattice. So you've been there for about a year and a half. You said I'd love to hear a little bit more specifically about, Lattice, the company. How
Yeah.
big is it? Where is it? What are they really focused on? Obviously, we're
Sure.
going to dig into microgrids specifically as a specialty here in a minute, but give us some context about the company itself. Yeah.
So Lattice has been a developer construction company for about 45, almost 50 years now. And it's been a very solid company that's out of Georgia. Hinesville is where our headquarters is. So we have a wide variety of different industries that we participate in. And so the industries are really from industrial to municipal to cities and schools. We do a lot of heavy work obviously in agriculture and food production. We're the lead company in renewable energy in the food and agricultural space. And so we have a good footprint. Right now, I think we have projects in 20 states.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We
Projects
are
ongoing right now.
That's
currently
right.
active.
That's right.
Okay.
That are in some form or phase. We've got 87 projects that are on the drawing board. We are scaling pretty rapidly. We're working on new programs with the USDA. We're doing some piloting with them on a few things that I might be able to talk to you about in the few months. But yeah, so we're and our footprint is we just started our first project in Canada, but also in the Caribbean and South America, we're working on several projects. And in one particular case, we have an opportunity to work with an up and coming country that is coming into great wealth, and they are deciding to really make a mark with how they view energy, and they've invited us into that discussion. So we're looking forward to the next number of years. There's a bright future. We're developing out a footprint that will be not only wide, but very deep, as you're going to come to learn as our product line is really from energy generation, solar, wind, all the way down to the light bulb. And so, and I mean that in comprehensively, not only the outside of the building envelope that we look at, and we look very intently on the inside of the envelope and all the systems that take place and those things that maybe need to be reevaluated to get to net zero.
Yeah, wow. So, like I said, quite all expansive in the level of expertise in clean energy and deployment space, certainly. So, great to hear a lot of the work in the food and ag. Obviously, one of the industries that is toughest to decarbonize, generally speaking, across the board. I know it's tough enough just to develop itself. Looking through the Lattice website, it's clearly a lot of solar going into it. But I'd like to kind of take a quick pivot here into really the generation point that you picked on here, which is a big part of microgrids as we understand it. So I kind of want to take it that direction, away from the holistic development side and into kind of a discussion on microgrids here. So if you could just take a couple of minutes, just take us to school on what is a microgrid. Tell us why it's important and how they work ultimately, but give us the real fundamentals on the mechanics. Like, what are we talking about when we think of a microgrid?
A microgrid does not need to be complicated, and microgrids are at different levels, if you will. There's larger microgrids, and then there's smaller microgrids. And I'll leave a chart for us to look at later on. However, a microgrid is basically a local energy system, and it's as it were electric. It's an electrical island. And it's capable of producing and distributing energy to different facilities within a network. And so they have the potential also to store energy. So they're not only generating, but also they're storing it. And we're using that energy at the peak or the optimum time based upon the software that we build around it. So a microgrid is really a way to distribute energy at the local level. And we call those distributed areas, or they're called distributed energy resources, or DERs.
DERs, yeah.
Yeah, DERs. And so, and those could, be comprised of a number of things. It could be solar, that could be a DER. Wind could be another component, or the storage capacity through our batteries or whatever we're using, or generators. And then the intelligent controls that are surrounding that whole system are part of that DER scenario. So we've got, the probably the biggest thing that we see is that there's intelligent controls. Before everything was centralized. Well, you've got a lot of micro climates, you've got a lot of micro decisions that are being made, and that's what the benefit of a microgrid is that it's not centralized decision making where you gloss over all the irregularities and the nuances of a local situation. Here, you're able to, because of not only the cloud and AI, I'll come back to that, but you've got these situations where you've got to make multiple decisions quickly in order to optimize something. And so what we're doing is we're optimizing that system or the decision making through a number of different software applications that we apply to the microgrid.
Oh, interesting. I love that concept. I never thought about that. So it's a kind of a localized way to address kind of the duck curve, so to speak, right? Where
that's right.
The kind of load may be a little bit more specific than the entire utility grid that we're talking about here.
What do you think would be like a really average example of what a microgrid? So say like a fleet, they're looking to, install a microgrid. Maybe they're having trouble with your utility. Maybe they're just really looking to, investigate what a microgrid would look like for them. Is there kind of just a standard microgrid solution that a lot of fleets are starting to kind of move towards? Or are they all on a case-by-case basis? What does an average microgrid look like?
So I think an average microgrid would be, or a typical design, it has power generation attached to it.
So solar, wind.
So you have solar, wind, you have waste to energy. That could be another component that we maybe overlook. But anything that's generating power, and we've got our different products within those different systems. But then the next category is typically storage and batteries and generators. All of that. Then you've got your inverter, and then another important component is becoming. We're seeing in probably, I was telling Connor this the other day, I would say 2/3 of our projects now are involving EV charging. Mm-hmm. So that's an important component, because as we electrify, as we bring on fleets that are electrifying, as we are bringing on more forklifts that are electrifying, and you're helping to provide those important credits, that is how we're able to evaluate how much energy we really need.
Interesting.
Got it. So just to put this in context, it doesn't have to be a municipal scale type of application here. This could be a building or a little bit bigger, maybe, but this is solar assets on site, maybe wind on site, but there might be landfill gas, converting electricity, something to generate on site there. There's some element of storage.
Exactly. In fact, exactly right. In fact, I'll give you the spectrum. The spectrum might be something. We're working with a group down in San Diego. They've got a couple of cold storage facilities. Well, they want to evaluate things and optimize things virtually, and they want to be able to do that at the optimum levels. When to sell, when to buy, when to push back into the grid or sell into the grid. These are the sort of things that it enables you to do, and so you can do it with a small group of buildings or small area, if you will. But also then we're working with a school district. They have, I think it's 14 different schools, but you can control that from one central command at your fingertips. And so that's what makes it so appealing.
Mm. And when you're looking at kind of the demand for microgrids, a lot of these companies, they're looking to solve a specific problem. They have a problem with, either, again, their utility, or they have a specific kind of issue that they need to resolve. What is that kind of traditional problem that microgrids solve for most people?
Yeah, a lot of it is that I think that's a good way to state it, Connor, is that you've got almost legacy issues, and then you've got new issues. And like the legacy issues is, how do we deal with hot weather and HVAC, and how do you deal with brownouts, or blackouts, right? How do you have resiliency in your normal course of business. And it's becoming a greater urgency to deal with that and think about it, because we've had power outages and failures across the nation, and we will continue. And part of the reason is because we're slack on our maintenance, and we're not getting to updating our systems and our products. And so we have deficient systems. And so it's driving that demand toward, we need to control that. We need to have sovereignty, if you will. I'm working on another project with sovereign food. But yeah, so you want to have sovereignty over your power, so to speak, in the sense that you can have assurance that you're going to have resiliency.
So these microgrids, the solution that they're providing is really quite wide. They're not addressing one single problem. They're addressing a number of problems that a lot of different fleets have. That must mean that there's a huge demand for a lot of that, especially here in California, where there's a lot of regulations that are pushing towards,
That's
to your point, a lot more EV deployments, a lot more solar, a lot more on-site storage. Is microgrid demand starting to increase right now? Is it, or has it always just been increasing?
Well, I think we're definitely in the extreme growth mode right now, and we will see that over the next couple of years. You've got certain utilities, I won't name any names, but certain utilities up north, as an example, that they're telling customers, we can't give you power for 2 or 3 years, or we got a backlog in this type of a component like a transformer or whatever. There's backlogs in product supply chain, but then there's utilities that are just not ready for it. And part of it is that they're still working on, infrastructure themselves. And so it's really pushed the demand to be fulfilled by microgrids. And so that's where it comes into a decentralized, system, if you will, and that resiliency. And I think that we're going to see that just going forward. People are needing that resiliency. And it's not just if you want to have that day to day, but we're seeing industrial parks, as an example, be set up as a microgrid from day one. And now we're looking at others that are seeing, how do we convert what we're doing or supplement what we're doing? And we're doing a lot of that work as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I love the idea of decentralization. I think we're out here in Northern California around, we're SMUD territory, but all around us, we're surrounded by PG&E and power safety shutoff issues and everything else. And I think the idea of taking a little bit of control back and at least mitigating that sort of risk with some element of microgrid, big or small, seemingly makes a lot of sense.
If I could just add one comment, I think that price is another thing that, we haven't really talked about much, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. But as far as, we're able to install a microgrid into a situation, and we're lowering the cost of that power consumption or that energy cost for that business, sometimes by a third. I mean, up to 50%. So we're seeing that by applying a microgrid, it's instant savings because of what we're doing. And so that's an appeal to itself. And then you might ask, well, how do we get paid? How do we pay for this? And we'll talk more about that in the coming questions, I'm sure.
Yeah, so relatedly, it seems like the ability to negate any sort of demand charges, be able to load shift functionally is really kind of the point. Ultimately, it seems like, and so the cost savings inherently are significant, but it seems like also the beating heart of a microgrid here is really the ability to control all of this. And so you did mention software as being really, really important here. I'd love to have you just riff a little bit on the software side of things and really kind of dig into like why that is really the new element here.
If I might just give you an example of like maybe a fleet of trucks or a fleet, because I know there's a lot of your probably your client list and those that are involved in talking with you on a regular basis are thinking, I've got a fleet of buses, I've got a fleet of trucks, I've got a fleet of ambulances, whatever that fleet looks like. If you're a major company, you've got a fleet of something oftentimes. And so that fleet is going to, there's compliance coming down the road. And we talked about this, but this compliance is really coming quicker than we think. And so, sustainability officers and those that are in operations are really starting to think about these things. I'm having conversations daily with them. And so my point is that one, you should be starting to think about that. I want to encourage you to start thinking about it, because the lead times are 2 to 3 to 4 years on some things that we're working toward. Now a microgrid can be put in very quickly when you're installing something that you control. Again, we have a lot of advantages. But let's just take a fleet of buses as an example. It could be a school bus, it could be a municipal bus, it could be all kinds of different types of vehicles. But let's just use buses as an example. If you're trying to convert 20 different buses from diesel to you've got electric buses. Each of those batteries are going to, let's just say, be 400 kW batteries. If you've got 20 buses, you've got 8 megawatts of power that you need to generate onto that site before you can turn on those buses, so to speak. And so the question becomes, well, where's that going to come from? And so that's where a microgrid becomes so valuable, because it gives you options right then and there versus relying upon, one of the local utilities or one of the cooperatives that are in your area. And so that becomes a big lifeline, if you will, to the whole question. Connor, you were going to ask.
Well, so I was, so when looking at, any kind of microgrid deployment, essentially you're saying that if you have a bottleneck for any, say, if you have power capacity limitations where you just can't get enough power, or for large deployments, something like your example, you have multiple megawatts, you may even need a substation put in, and that could be incredibly expensive, even longer in terms of lead time than, say, 2 to 3 years. For a microgrid installation, you can not only get around the power capacity constraint, you could get it done faster than a utility could get power to that site as well, and you could do that for a third of the price, or 2/3 of the price,
a fraction of the cost. And there's ways that this might be a good time to segue into. How do we get these things financed? How do we make them sense? It's got to have value. There has to be an ROI. We look at everything. Every project has to have an ROI. We're not just doing it, and we're not just installing and making recommendations because it's the thing to do or the cool thing to do. Instead, it's got to make sense, and these projects are making sense. And one of the reasons that they're making sense is because the typical capital stack is changing. The capital stack now has grants, and it has tax credits, and it has accelerated depreciation that it didn't have in the past. It had elements of it, but it has now a full throttle. I mean, the USDA is encouraging and pushing us to get out and offer these grants. And so if you live or if your business is in a rural area and it has less than 50,000 people in general terms, you are qualified to receive special grants by the USDA that are related to energy. And so these grants are called REAP grants, and these grants it put everything over the top. I mean, instead of your traditional loans, now the capital stack allows you to have little into it, and the tax credits and the depreciation, and then these grants push it up where some systems are almost 80 to 90% paid for.
Wow. Yeah, this is a really important point that I think is missed often. Is people think of storage, they think of solar asset deployment, they think expense, a capital expenditure cost. But I think what they're missing is, if they are looking into your bus example here for fleet electrification, working with the local utility, if they may not or probably don't have a make-ready program, unless you're out here in California, there's a significant cost and a significant cost time delay of just getting whatever your utility-based electrification cost will be, and the actual capital cost of solar deployments, battery storage, other things that you can get in the ground much, much sooner by just dealing with the building department, and still kind of dealing with utility just on interconnection, but you're not dealing with massive interconnection upgrades, is a huge, huge cost saver.
So we try to stay behind the meter when we can. And it's a win-win for those that are involved in the project because we're able to do things quicker and it's less costly, of course. But I described a typical capital stack of, you've got these credits and all these different grants that we've been referring to. And that's a whole discussion into itself, is tax credits and grants, of which we advise a lot in this category because if you can't get a project financed or paid for, or how it's going to be paid for, then it's a showstopper. And we're all about making sure that projects get through. Our company, we employ 3 full-time grant writers. We push through dozens of grants every year into the USDA and the Department of Energy, and also on a local basis as well. So we're very attuned to the nuances of what is required. But let me just say, I think it's important that you've got that typical capital stack, but also you've got some newer vehicles that are, in some cases, not new, but they're shining. They're definitely shining, and they're having their day right now. So, as an example, through the use of either a PPA or virtual power purchase agreement. So we all know that a PPA is a power purchase, but also through a new vehicle that we're using is a virtual power purchase agreement. And these are vehicles that can be used to allow for there to be little capex out of the pocket of the customer. And so they can go into a project. I'll give you an example. We're working with a school district. They don't have extra cash sitting around. And so they're relying upon grants. They're relying upon any direction. And we've come in and said, you don't have to pay for anything. Our investors, not our company investors, but we have a group that will come and invest in the entire project. We will guarantee you a fixed price on your power, and it's going to be 20-30% less than you're paying now. And we're going to fix that over 10, 20, 30 years. And we're going to do that through fixed increases that are a fraction, 2-3%, as opposed to the erratic energy increases that we're seeing. My wife came to me the other day and she goes, "Did you know that our energy just increased 14%?" And I'm hearing this across the country. I mean, 11%, 20%, 18. How do you plan for that? That's difficult if you're an operations manager or a fleet manager. How do you plan for that erratic behavior in your energy costs? Instead, we can fix that, and it's going to be far less. And we can fix also your EV charging, and that could be a revenue source as well. So we've got a lot of things that we give you options toward, that gives you ability to optimize your situation. I'd like to talk, at least mention the VPPA, if I could. So the virtual power purchase agreement it's a vehicle that is used when you don't or cannot generate the power on the site. We've got an example. We're working with the second largest energy user in Arizona, and they are a food producer, and they just don't have the site available to them. We try to put it, we actually looked at all kinds of different creative ways. And by the way, because of that project, now we are very equipped as to what types of solar could be put where. And so we're putting them vertically on buildings now. We're now putting them in pavers. We're putting them, a host of different directions. I think it's important that I segue here. If you can kind of picture the awning over a ball field, mm-hmm. and that awning could be used as not only shade, but also now we're able to put solar over that. So now we have the applications of putting it over water canals. We can put it over crops. We can shade over, cattle, those that are raising cattle and that sort of thing. So you've got all these good options that, because of the innovations that are taking place in the space. So as a result, there was no space on the property. So we found a reservation outside of town, miles away, and they graciously said, "We'd love to lease the property to you. We're going to put a solar farm there of, I think it's 8 megawatts, and we're going to have a solar farm that will be credited to this food producer's energy as a way to offset. So again, a creative way that we're using, but we're offsetting, and it's going to be a great project for them.
Yeah, I mean, in the financing just keeps stacking here. So we're well experienced in what is called book and claim accounting, which is rec procurement and retirement for purposes of the low carbon fuel standard crediting, right? And so I think that all of that, is integrated, as you mentioned, now more and more, pretty much always, I suppose, for EV integration into microgrids. Now, and you really start to do the math pretty quickly, and it feels like fleets that are looking to just now either, come off just their pilot project or looking to do a little bit bigger thing and are really coming to a quick realization that things are going to take forever with their utility to get things fully upgraded, or just that the grid generally is not ready for this. And so being able to be decentralized and get stuff just, copper in the ground faster for their facility makes a lot more sense. And that the seems like the moral of the story here is that microgrids don't have to be expensive. They, in fact, when you start thinking about the time delay here, it's much more worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Time is a big factor that we often don't factor in, right? We don't factor in time oftentimes. And also, we don't factor in power resiliency as a value. So if you're a sausage maker, as an example, and your system in power goes down while you're in the middle of one of your runs, or let's say you've got 3 or 4 lines, and you've got product that's in the machinery, or you're a chemical company that you've got chemicals that are part or connected to a process, and you're shut down, that could cost you 200, 500,000 a day, whatever that looks like. So power resiliency is a big, big issue, and moving forward, we have a lot of solutions for it.
And, looking kind of in that future, it seems like microgrids have come quite a long way, since the days of, just installing some solar. Maybe you have, a few battery packs on site. But like you said, the logic behind the controls has gotten significantly more sophisticated. The photovoltaic cells, they've gotten significantly more efficient. Yeah. There's a lot of other battery storage options that really make it a lot more sophisticated than it used to be. And I'm actually really curious to see kind of where that innovation in microgrids it is right now and kind of where it's going. It seems like, there's so many different options available to people. What's that next step in terms of the innovation that we're starting to see in the technology?
Well, I think that we're still in the infancy stages of decentralization. So I think that we're going to see this innovation that's going to continue to evolve in the space. I'll give you an example. We didn't have the computing capabilities but now we do, because we have the cloud. We have the ability to solve complex problems simultaneously through the use of different algorithms and AI that we didn't necessarily come in contact with or we're not using in the space. So those are the sort of things that I think is we're going to see a lot of advancement in. Obviously we're going to see on the hardware side of things, we're going to see better batteries, and it's going to. In fact, we're working with a group that has got a most eco-friendly battery. It's lighter. It's going to last longer. It's got all the things that we would think about, and it can even produce carbon credits. So anyway, there's a lot of really exciting things that we're seeing in building products in general. I'll just say there is new concrete that's coming out that is going to decrease carbon emissions. There are building products that have to do with different types of materials that are going to relieve, the typical process of wood and these sort of things. So it's pretty exciting. I think that the main things are going to be, the software that we see and the ability to control and make simultaneous decisions on complex things. I think that's where we're going to start to see real advancements, and that's what we're starting to see now.
It just seems like the more advanced we get, the more and more endpoints is kind of the way I like to think about it. The more and more endpoints there are available, the more things there are available to be read, or data accessible, or things that can be controlled, ultimately all the way through building efficiency and automations, and one thing after another you can stack from top to bottom, and all of it really could and probably should be run through the same sort of microgrid controlling system, because it's all the same stuff. It's all about energy conservation. It's all about efficiency.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we're going to see it, these microgrids installed in areas where they're not traditionally been, like in transportation centers. We're going to see rural electric cooperatives starting to employ these sort of things. One of the innovations that I think that is important is that there are now financing vehicles, and that's a real innovation that is not a hardware or software type of app, but it's a financial instrument that is propelling and really giving a lot of light to this. And I think you're going to see a lot of investment dollars pour into the space because of it, because the returns are good. And we're seeing things that we're working with the IRS on a number of things that there could be some additional advantage that I'd like to talk about on a future podcast. But there's just a lot of innovation and a lot of resources that are being applied to the space like I've never seen before.
Speaking of resources, when companies that traditionally haven't looked into microgrids before are really kind of transitioning into looking at sustainability, their EV transition, and really kind of diving in to this world without really any prior experience, they are now looking at all of this with the kind of the longer term view of, okay, we're going to have to get into this, but we have 5 to 7 years worth of compliance targets that we have to hit. How are we going to maintain this? How are we going to operate this? And, talking about sophisticated controls, that may be difficult for a lot of companies to try and bring on quickly. Yep. But, operations and maintenance, at least on the EV side, is a huge point of conversation. Maintaining the chargers, making sure the uptime of the chargers is, above at least 90%, if not more. Yep. Yep. Trying to look at what O&M looks like for a lot of these fleets are really, really critical. What does the operations and maintenance on a microgrid look like? How should people look at that?
Yeah, they actually, it's a great point that you're raising, and that is a lot of people don't consider it, but we build it into every project. We work with what we feel is the top partner in the space. We work with only top tier 1 types of products and services. And so they're one of them. Their company name is Omnidian, and we are very proud to partner with them because they are one of the leaders. And in our mind, they are the leader in the space. And so, it just gives us comfort because they'll respond to any situation within hours. They have 24/7 crews. They're responsive. And so we actually provide that as part of our package. And so the first year is provided into the cost of our projects because it's so important. And they have sophisticated algorithms as well behind the scenes to see if they can detect a wire that's loose or something that would be a component. And, those are we're protecting assets, that's, our job. And so we don't start a project and then leave the project. We start a project from the design stage all the way through engineering, construction, and then we follow it through all the way through the O&M process. So it's an important part of it. And we're glad to be partnered with what we think is the best in the business.
Yeah, I guess that's the beauty of running everything through central command here is you have access to all of the different DERs and loads and everything else, not to mention having access to the load profiles themselves. So you start getting into predictive maintenance and all sorts of other really interesting activities that kind of you might see at your fingertips here, simply because you have, again, the data. It's all just right there for you.
And predictive analysis is a big part of what we do. That type of work is overlooked in many cases. Predictive analysis and allowing your systems to look at the maintenance and where we can do more energy savings on these sort of things, and where to trim and where to allow maximum or optimum situations. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's connected into the operation and maintenance.
Yeah. Michael, I feel like we could talk for an hour on this kind of stuff. I have 1,000 more questions, so I think we might try to take you up on getting you back on to dig into some microgrids again here in the future. But just a couple of quick follow-up questions for the listener here. If they really want to get some more information on you, on Lattice, generally speaking, and some information on microgrids, where can you point people in the right direction here?
So you can reach out to us through our webpage, of course, latticeenergysolutions.com. feel free to contact me directly. I'll give you my telephone number. It's 949-939-8352. I'm glad to entertain any of those discussions. And my email is michael@latticeenergysolutions.com. And I'm glad to consult and give you a lot of options. We'll give you plenty of options and prove that there's value to be had in the discussions and the propositions that we put on the table.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you again. Really appreciate you giving us the download here on all things microgrid, on yourself, and on Lattice. Really appreciate you coming on the Chart Cycle.
Yeah, thanks very much, Todd and Connor. I've always enjoyed every bit, and looking forward to the next time as well.
All right, everybody, that is Michael Dews, VP of Renewable Energy and Smart Buildings at Lattice Energy Solutions. For the rest of us, we'll catch you next time for the content you were looking for that Michael had mentioned, including that slide. We will have all of that available in the show notes for you later. Until next time, get out there and get plugged in.